Sam, thanks for joining us today in this third episode of the Coachcast. I really appreciate you coming on. And just for those, I know we've obviously known each other a few years now.
Yep.
We've kind of messaged back and forwards, and you've done a few presentations for me, which have been awesome. So I appreciate you coming on. Just for the people that don't know who you are, do you want to just give a quick wrap and just let them know what's going on?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, mate. I appreciate it, and especially in this time of enforced downtime, it's good to get these things in. For all of your listeners, my name's Sam Portland. I've been a strength and conditioning coach, physical performance coach. I make athletes better. Don't really care what job title you call me. That's one of my pet hates. For a good 10 years, worked in professional rugby, track and field, and now over the last couple of years, I've moved into consultancy. One of my athletes is at the Atlanta Falcons in the NFL. I work privately with numerous professional rugby players with development of field sport speed, essentially. It's a big missing component. I also run my own academy, so we've got a full long-term athletic development system to beat the degeneration of young kids and their physical qualities, and also do a lot of online coaching, coach education, just really building out and trying to push the industry forward. Really, that's me in a nutshell. Really, so
that's awesome. And I know you've been putting loads of great content out there. I've been following you pretty closely for a few years now. And you mentioned there, so you work with some field sport athletes. You do quite a bit of consulting and stuff like that. And now, and I know we've talked about this a bit as well with your speed development model. Mm-hmm. Now, do you want to talk us through that or go into a little bit of detail about that?
Yeah, I can do. Let's share this screen. I've got some presentations up and stuff. You good? Can you see this?
Give me a second.
Oh no, I've not pressed start sharing. That's why.
All right. I can see myself.
There we go. Okay, so so you should be able to see this now. So this I went down to Justin Kavanagh's place last November and did an in-service with him, and I put some stuff together for his staff. When talking about speed, and if you know Cav, you know he knows a lot about speed, and so it was a bit of a daunting experience for myself. But essentially for me, my mission is to find the least and get the most, especially when, in terms of, now I can really relay this back to how I work now. When you're working with pro guys and they come to see you on their day off, you have to really understand the role of skill acquisition and technical mastery in the development of speed. Purely because also the huge gap and the missing piece in the puzzle with these athletes is that they're not taught how to run. They're just not taught how to run. And that's what really pushed me hard into releasing my progressions manual, is that these guys are paid so much money to play a sport that they play, and they can't move their body effectively. And the coaches that are in their positions are they either do know what their hands are tied and they don't prioritize it well enough, or they don't know and they just how to coach. And I think the truth somewhere lies in between, that they just don't know how to, or the true value of actually getting people to run fast transfers to pretty much everything, because it's the heightened state of the central nervous system, and you're huge there. So just a couple of things here. I love this. I'm not a big fan of posting massive quotes, but when I do present and when I talk to people, I try my best to bring them into the conversation, and that's a huge thing for me. Is I don't like to stand at the front of a room and just dictate and have people take notes. My presentations, I try for them to become a conversation with everyone in the room. So much to the point where I did a seminar beginning of this year down for Stephen Jones, and I prepared 0 slides for the whole seminar, and that was it was a very daunting experience for everyone in the crowd. Like, I was absolutely fine because it was just like coaching a brand new group of athletes, but it was interesting for them, and that's something that I try to do. And again, you know, coaching involvement here, that this this quote I use everywhere because it's transferable. It's hugely important. Being able to subconscious versus consciousness. And I think in coaching and movement and in life, it's a really important balance to understand. So it's highly transferable. And then if I was going to break it down just a little bit further, huge fan of reductionism. And if you your listeners don't know about reductionist theory, then they should really go and look into it, because it's just, you know, people call it reverse engineering. It's about breaking down and understanding the constituent parts of a process and then piecing it together and building it back in. And this is where you find with athletes in coaching that they try to, they really distort the balance between specificity and simulation and actual adaptation. And the reductionist approach will allow you not only to really pull that whole Venn diagram together, but what it also will do is give you the opportunity to understand where you need to put your eggs in the basket at a certain period of time for different athletes. Because if you break that reductionism down, then you can elicit KPIs to certain things, and not just your traditional strength metrics or power metrics. There's qualitative KPIs that you need to be seeing, and also quantitative ones, and then you can start building it together. An example here, qualitative versus quantitative KPI. Someone I work with, professional hamstring semimembranosis proximal tendon rupture. I got sent some tape of them doing some running, and you know, strength deficits were absolutely fine. Qualitatively, technically, coordination and synchronization just wasn't there. It's like, I've been told to run fast. If you want my professional opinion, you shouldn't be running fast yet. It's about piecing it together, because I could see the problem that I had to point out to them at slow speeds, I could see it at fast speeds. And if it looks shit slow, it's going to be shit fast. But you'll break at fast speeds. You won't break at slow speeds. And with a tendon rupture, there's a whole shit that can happen with that, especially proximal to the knee. So again, I'll get into the speed stuff, but just as a general, so people can sort of really see where I'm coming from, is you've got tools, principles, concepts, short-term, medium-term, long-term vision for every sort of building a program. But then you've got this lovely little thing that people forget about. It's called reality. And that's the one that you're faced with. I remember the first time years and years ago, I heard Buddy Morris talk about, I only program 2 weeks in advance. I was like, what? Like, why? I've programmed 2 days in advance now, you know, because it is the reality of the situation, having confidence that you know and understand the underlying processes that you're putting them through with principles and concepts in mind, and just picking the right tools at the right time. Like, I'm not a squat guy. I'm not a trap bar guy. I'm the right guy for the athlete that he needs, you know, those right tools. And that's it. I remember saying to a lot of my players, like, I need you to put a lot of force with external load on. What lift do you want to do? We had like 4 different lifts going on. It was like, all right, sweet, I'm happy. I don't give a shit, like, because it's not that important. And it's just about putting it together. So, and how that all sort of builds into my notion of speed is huge important is the education of your athletes to understand the technical models and mental clarity, because that is going to really drive the transfer of skill development. And people, yes, you go like, I criticize myself, Sam, that's just like, you can see people in sessions, this is so frontal brain dominant. It's like, exactly, because it has to be. At certain times, it has to be. You cannot get better at running fast by playing games, because you're operating on a subconscious movement level. If you fail and cloud and and become. I've seen people fucking lose their head time and time again because it's so frontal brain dominant, and I'm happy with that as a coach. I'm happy. I'm so happy with that because, like I said, if someone sees me on their day off, then I want to be taxing their brain more than their body. I want them to be learning and understanding. And I know that may not be popular opinion with certain people, but it's reality. The reality of the situation. If you hide behind chase games all the time, you're doing your athletes a disservice, because if you're pitching at the right level and if you apply reductionist theories and reductionist mechanisms towards your coaching, then you know that you can pitch at the right level of skill acquisition and the development of motor control with specific force production capabilities. Then what you're going to do is get this whole domino effect. You're going to get a domino effect from step 1 to step 2. And as we go into that limb exchange, and development of things is slow. That's what I've written here: slow, fast, slow. Perform it slow, you will get fast, and then you got to slow it right down again, because as soon as step 1 gets faster, step 2 is compromised, step 3 is compromised, step 4 is compromised, and that domino effect again and again and again. And I would set KPIs with my athletes, and with large group of athletes, and this is how someone messaged me on Instagram yesterday about the use of wickets. And I don't use wickets to make people faster. I use wickets to allow athletes to understand a few different things for different athletes. Sometimes I'll use wickets where I've got an athlete who's spending too long on the ground. Use it to shape that environment to get their foot up. You stack the wickets closer. You've got a rough idea of where they need to run. You stack them closer, and it has to generate higher leg speed, because otherwise they're going to fail. They're going to hit their but what I like to do with something like that is I will, people go, how many wickets do you use? Well, I said, the hurdles come in a pack of 12, so that's what we use. And just, it doesn't have to, it doesn't matter if you're stressing and working in the right ways. And I will run them all at the same distance. I'll run them all at the same distance, because I'm holding that athlete back. But the more momentum they're producing, the faster they're getting, the faster their legs have to turn over. And then all you do is, once you can see that they can complete that, it's like, right, then we start pushing it out. And what that allows, I've used it from that way. I've used it for athletes to teach them how to float, to feel light, because as soon as you take them, you put them on the track, their hip displacement drops, because they've got nothing that's going to keep them. And if their learning is not there yet, and they can't do it in that open environment, then put them in this restricted, closed environment so they can learn it. My guys have never run PBs in wickets, and they never will. Like, they never will. They've run it when they've run it. When we take them out of frontal brain, and we get them to execute. And that's a huge important thing for me. And also a really nice one, where I look to go, okay, so operationally, I know that if I can get someone up to seven of my pigeon feet, so the space between, if your listeners don't know what pigeon feeting is, heel toe steps. So it's just stacking your feet next to each other. If I can get them up to 7, then they're close to touching 9 meters per second. And so for me, for team sport guys, 9 meters per second is the barrier of entry that we work towards, especially for a back, depending on the level and classification. But then also it's you can then use. So if I'm going to look at, say, wickets for a certain example, if I'm going to start taking an athlete through a series of wickets and working on certain KPIs, if my athlete starts at the first wicket with a touchdown in the middle, and then gets to 7 and the touchdown is closer to the hurdle prior, then they're not accelerating. They're slowing down. It's common sense. But then what you do is you find the first point. You find the first point where that stops. And then you go and have a look at a technical model of that stage. And then you start picking up and you work on that sticking point. Because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be an education thing. then it's going to be a physical thing, because it's the internal sensation of sprinting, especially if max velocity is running over the ground, and athletes don't like it, especially big, heavy rugby players. They don't like it. They don't know what it feels like. It's really unbalanced. And they've got to learn that sensation of being unbalanced so they can keep accelerating. But then it's kind of like slow, fast, slow. It's like, right, well, I've got to get someone to 9 meters per second in less than 20 meters. I got someone to 9.5. This was a girl. I got someone to 9.5 meters per second in 12 steps.
Right.
And by going through a process of elimination, I'll take you through to this model here that I've put together. And this has taken a little bit of time, and it's kind of like you can see that it's a never-ending cycle. This learn, load, and execute. I've put it on my Instagram and talked about it a lot, because it's a really visual way for me to understand stuff. And also, like, I'm dyslexic, so I'm incredibly visual. And I couldn't even tell you the last time I read a book. And so what I've just basically explained to you through this process of wickets there is this learn, load, and execution model. We have to learn the positions before we can load the positions, and we either load that through technical stress or external resistance, and then we put them in a place where they can execute. And this was basically a process that I took a lot of the athletes through when he came up with the concept of speed gate golf. It's a really, really simple process. Is that a lot of my guys couldn't upright horizontal projection and acceleration over the first 3 steps for team sport athletes is incredibly difficult. It is incredibly difficult to get maximal horizontal projection from upright positions when compared to obviously track. And I've taken some of Ralph Mann's KPIs that he uses in his book and sort of using them for my touchdowns for my first few steps. And we work to those touchdowns, and then also percentage of those optimal touchdowns if I work, depending on how much I want to slow them down and load them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I
got you.
Sweet, man. So because this is where there is a huge disconnect between the relative stress of sprinting as well, and understanding how you can really de-stress. But people are like, well, do you run at a percentage of max velocity? Yes, you fucking do. Yes, you do. Because you and this is a huge thing. Like I've argued with a few people time and time again about this. It's like, would you 1RM your athletes every week, 3 times a week? No. So why are you 1RM sprinting 3 times a week and expecting to get better?
And this is one thing that I've heard you talk about before, and I thought that's really interesting. You can almost say it's a very similar concept to like your Nordic lean exercise and stuff like that. You're hitting like a 1RM all of a sudden even with like a novice athlete, and your model that you're talking about here is you're essentially saying slow down to speed up.
Earn the right to go fast.
Exactly. You've got to find those gears and understand what that feels like, and that's where. And I'll let you go into this in a second with your I heard your Speedgate Golf podcast, and you talk about finding those gears and actually like trying to hit a number so you can understand what your gears are. So what is a 90% relative to a 95 or even an 80%? And I think that's phenomenal, because as soon as your athletes can understand gears and things like that, then they can really start coaching themselves.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, but as well, like hopefully we put it, because there are these fucking weight room nauseas that are ruining athletes' careers, and like and especially like I've had guys who come fresh out of uni that want to come work with me and intern and spend time with me. Absolutely, more the merrier. And it's like, where would you first start an athlete? And 9 times out of 10 they say 3 sets of 10, like in the weight room. I was like, where would you start an athlete sprinting? 3 sets of 10 sprints. No. That's the disconnect that we're dealing with. And it's not if a coach is coming out of a £30,000 degree with that, and the entitlement that I've spent £30,000, I'm fucking really good, then we've got to address that disconnect, because then they're imparting on athletes, and that's a big reason why I started the academy. But that's another thing. So hopefully, basically, by the time they get there, they're not so fucked up. They're actually going to be better than and where they should be, to undo all the fucking shit that they've gone through. And I hope that we can swear on this.
You can swear. Podcast. Go to town.
Yeah. And this is where you can play around with relative percentage of intensity. And how do you get that? Well, you need to film a lot. You do need to film a lot. You create cues that slow people down. You create cues that speed people up. This is really, really simple. But you need to, like any good investigative research, that you just need to get a baseline profile. You just need to get a baseline profile, like an upright standing 10 meter. Look at your touchdowns, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Get that 10-meter time. If you've got gates, you can look at your average velocities through GPS. You can look at your peak velocities. Understand the relationship between how those steps are working against you or with you, and look at those perfect combinations. And that's like a whole fucking. That's something crazy that is for another conversation, but. What we can do here is if we take the basic progressions, right? So we've got to learn our front side position. Learn our front side position through a basic wall hold. Understand what it's like to have our weight distributed in front of us and being vulnerable there. And we load that. So this is my basic progression. So wall hold. And then we load that wall hold through an isometric. We'll band round the hip. First and foremost, we'll band around the hip, and we'll be loading that structure integrity. We'll be going from, we'll be stressing it medial and laterally, and also anterior posteriorly with that band, because people underestimate what the medial and lateral slings, their role is within sprinting. They're so important. They're so important because we fail to recognize the medial and lateral rotation of sprinting that we're trying to combat the whole time. And this is where the thigh and the arm, that opposite position, creates blocking and blocks rotation medial laterally, not just anterior posteriorly. So then we'll load through the waist to start off with medial laterally. Then we can load around the thigh when we're looking to just get a bit more front side push and activate the anterior slings. So we're using our right leg forward, we'll be activating the anterior sling from right hip to left shoulder, and then also the posterior sling from right shoulder to left hip, and also all the way down to the foot, if you can imagine that wall hold position. And then what we'll do is we'll just go out into a step 1. We'll just go into a first step push. And the role of the coach is to go, do you remember what that position felt like when you were learning it? Yes, coach. Now show me it. Job done. All right. Show me that position. And then this is a great one for coach, because I know that you'll coach with large groups, and I used to coach with large groups. And basically I use a rule of 3, a real simple rule of 3. So you put your athletes in groups of 3. You've got 1 doing the exercise, 1 coaching the exercise, 1 watching the exercise. You just set 2 basic KPIs. 2 is enough anymore. And then there is some rule with 2 bits of information is the most important. But like I said, I don't read books, so I've forgotten it. You're then going to repeat the process 3 times. And this is where you can frontally brain tax people without physically breaking them. And then as we scale up through the progressions of acceleration, then you'll go. So then if the execution's not there, it doesn't look like, we can't find that front side shape, then we ask why. Do we need to band round the foot? Is our rear leg off that push off going up or going forward? If it's going up, then we band round the foot. Then we go into our static to front side position. You find that front side position with external resistance. Now, we may get some structural strengthening, but 9 times out of 10, you're stressing the skill with external load. And that's a huge thing for people to understand, because you've probably got some of the strongest weight room guys in and around, especially in rugby. They're so strong, but their skill acquisition and their mastery in certain positions makes them so weak. And it's not because they're weak, it's because they're not skilled. It's really, really simple. We go back to classic motor control and learning. I've even got Deborah Rose's book here, and classic general motor programming. Go back to Bernstein with the hammer. You know, it's really, really simple, fundamental stuff, and you just got to learn to take that, like I said, reductionism, and apply it somewhere else. And then we push through, and then that learn, load, execute. It just scales up, because obviously you've got the intersecting red with the big white. So for every new level of skill mastery you get, this process stays the same. It stays the same. It's just you've just gone up the next level in the computer game, basically. And this is why, like, I really, really enjoy it, and this is how the game of, you know, the Speedgate Golf comes to light. And I think I've got a slide on this here. Yeah. So I've actually Joel from Just Fly has been hounding me for ages, and this lockdown I'm writing the book now. I'm writing the book. I've spent the money to get the front cover made, so I'm writing it, and it's coming out very, very soon. But the reason why the Speedgate Golf is really, really important is it's basically a fundamental psychology of systematic desensitization, which is basically a phobia-based psychological paradigm. So it helps remove phobia, stress, and here you can see that basically it establishes the anxiety and stimulus hierarchy. So your listeners will be really, really familiar with this fear of spiders, most common, you know, house mice, you know, but then also if you take that into performance anxiety, it's the from a managerial point of view, it's the meeting that you've got to go with the head coach. And head coaches, if they were worth their weight in gold, they wouldn't deliver through fear. They would actually desensitize their staff to the stress of meeting the boss, and then the staff would work a lot better for them. But also the stress of a cup final is where people use mental rehearsal tactics and stuff like that. And whilst yes, they do work, the Speedgate Golf was filled with the stigma that as soon as you get the gates out, someone gets hurt, and it's because of purely poor practice and poor preparation that these athletes were not ready for it. And we made a big point at my last club that the most important metric for me as a physical performance practitioner is speed times. It's the most important thing. I always used to say to my guys, there's two numbers I care about. It's your speed time and your signing bonus, and that's it. Everything else falls underneath it. They're the most important KPIs. And you know, because if we think of it from a hierarchy of specificity, if a player can move fast, he's got more time to learn and more time to read the game, and then he'll get paid more. Simple.
Just before you kind of delve into that a little bit more, Sam, do you think, I know obviously you're talking about that desensitization with the gates.
Yeah.
Do you find from working with athletes, obviously that's when you've typically got the gates out, you say they all perceive they might get injured.
Yeah.
Okay. How does that transfer if you're using like a GPS system or something like that? But you're telling them to do the exact same drill, for example?
Yeah. So that's really, really interesting, because the GPS, the attachment to GPS is very, very different, especially in team sports, because a lot of players hate GPS because they're going to get told they've not run far enough, so they've got to do more fitness. They don't usually associate it with speed, which is really, really interesting. But we bridge that gap for them. And the funny one is that you always get the player that spins it round in a circle, think he's going to clock a new max speed. But no, so and it's something that I'm doing now in my private stuff. I've got some catapult units that I use with my pro guys, and we're looking at bridging the gap by using I did a lot of stuff with I presented for catapult using raw force traces to understand speed development with athletes in team sports, and so we bridge that gap where we put attachment to GPS and the importance of speed, because obviously you're getting a lot of good, rich data. For me personally, I don't care if it's got inaccuracies, purely because I'm going to be ignorant and say that if they're inaccurate once, they'll be inaccurate every time. And that's fine with me. Like, I don't, I'm not producing a paper. I'm making athletes better. And that's really simple. And so you can expect some play. That's what I'm saying. And but then with the gates, they'll always just get excited because they want to run through and they hear the beep. It's all this psychological conditioning that they've got going on. They hear the beep. And I had some real simple rules. Like when we I was like, if you run through these gates when I've not told you, that's it, you're done. You're done. You've ruined your opportunity to get better. And the reason why you are done is because I don't want you to get hurt. If you break that trust with me, it's game over. And I had a very, very laid back relationship with all the athletes that I work with. I think it's very important. I mean, so far to the point, and some of your listeners might be like, what the fuck? Like, loads of them came to my 30th birthday. Right? So, like, yeah, I know, broke all the fucking rules, right? So
you build relationships though at the same time.
Exactly. And we had a beer together. I got drunk with my players. Holy shit. It was a Friday night and they didn't have a game on a Saturday. So and that's the whole holistic side of the coaching, and that holistic emphasis impacts this programming and coaching so heavily. And so the way that we get into this speed gate golf is that because you've got we used to drill with a metronome. People that really struggle with the drilling, and this is like, if you go with a lot of your listeners, they'll think of an athlete who's like, fuck, he is terrible at drilling, and drilling's really, really important. And some people say it doesn't matter, some people say it does matter. They become a learning tool before they become a warm-up tool. And that's, and the big learning that you get from drills is relaxation. That's a huge thing for me, is the relaxation, because if you start driving into you start trying to get athletes to run fast that have never run fast before, they tense up. And this is what speed gate golf allowed us to do, was remove anxiety, remove the stress, and then we create the response mechanism. So if you were to take the spider phobia, and the first thing that you can do is this is where reductionist programming will fall hopefully into place for you, the people that are listening, is that if you just talk to someone and ask them to think about a spider, and then write down their physiological and psychological response to a spider, that's your first step, because you've created the loop, you've created the stress response loop. And this looping's really, really important in programming as well. And programming for me is storytelling. Netflix creates addictive stories based on these open and closed loop theories, because Ozark is the best one. In the last chapter of every episode, they open a new loop. They open a new story loop somewhere in it, so it takes you to the next thing. And this is why. So if you go through, like, how does a spider make you feel? Okay, so we understand what our hierarchy of stress and anxiety is here. Then we'll go, right, well, why does that? And this is my internal process. I'm doing this with with my coaching, with my drills, and you can visually, when you understand this, you can visually see the stress and the anxiety the players go through when you're asking them to do new things. They're fucking terrified. And then it's like, right, so then you write spider down. Okay, because we've got to our next level of learn, load, and execute. We're now writing spider down, and then what does that make you feel like? And then you just build up through this process. And what we did is how and I'll dig into this a lot more reasons why into the book. But the first process was we just took the speed gates out and put them on the side of the pitch. That was me asking my person who's scared of spiders to think about spiders. We just put them there.
Just not turned on, just at the
they were
side
just
of the field.
in the bag. They were just in the bag.
All right.
So there was loads of arousal. And with all your coaches listening, do this whenever if you don't get hit by COVID, do this with your athletes. Go and just put your gates on the side of the pitch and watch what happens. There is mass hysteria, right? And then you've got your loop. You've closed your loop because you understand their relationship with the gates, how they'll behave with the gates, and their level of risk with the gates. And then we just built the stress response out from there. And again, I'll outline this in the book, to the point where the gates were up, and then we just basically started to get them to run through at 2 seconds for 10 meters. Can you hit 2 seconds in 10 for 10 meters? And it's very difficult because it goes back and it fulfills, again, the loop of your coaching process. And we talked about this at the beginning, is understanding gears. They don't know their gears. They don't know how to apply force. And then, do you know the magical thing that happens? I've got the book up here. Yeah, it's called there's a book, right, called The Righteous Mind. I say I don't read books. I don't read books like I look at pictures in them and diagrams and stuff. But I have a lot of books that I kind of like, I don't cover to cover things. I get too bored. But there's a concept in it. So, and it's called the hive switch. And if you think about soldiers marching in unison, Roman soldiers, what they use in this book, they are literally on a button. They've got this metronome going, and they're on a button. And trust me, as soon as one person hits 2, in the next 10 reps, you'll get 3 more.
Really?
Because what's going on in the background is that people are smart. They're really, really smart. The psychological conditioning is fantastic because they're listening. If you've got gates that can beep, I advise it's the most important thing. They're listening to the beeps. They're gauging time, because what I'll do is I'll stand and I'll call out the time, and then you will get this like applause. You'll get this boo, and then all of a sudden, when people start seeing it, it's like beep beep. You're like, nah, that's not it. That's not it. And I was like, well, I don't even have to read it out then, do I? And then they're like, that's close. What time is it? What time is it? And then it's like a 198, and everyone's like, whoa. It's like, well, what did his 198 look like? And then you bring them back to the technical model of acceleration, and then they go, rate that 198 out of 10. Is it a 10 out of 10 or is it a 2 out of 10? Because their technical model's not right. So you're still, in that sense, you're still working that rule of 3 of educating your athletes.
Going through that loop constantly.
Constantly going through that loop. And they're learning without doing, but by watching. It's the visual element of learning, you've got this whole myriad of game type play. You've got real frontal brain understanding of the technique, and then also a bit of mystery, because you just don't know. And then all of a sudden, it just happens. And like my reward process was that I used to take a picture with them, shake their hand, and I put it on my Instagram for running 2 seconds in 10 meters. It's like a backhand joke. And but they made the feed, and I used to put it up on whiteboards, and because the whole thing is slow, fast, slow. Earn the right to run fast. And there's no coincidence that I think through this process that we started in the pre-season, that by the end of it, all my backs were running either 165 over 10 meters or less. And all of them were running over, 9.2, 9.3 meters per second.
Right.
And there's no coincidence, because we built this understanding and relationship through it all. And we're probably going to have a lot more American listeners. So for like a 1.6, 10 meters would equate to, from a 2 point, be like a 151, 10. Be like a 151, 10 yard, something like that. Yeah. And for rugby players, these guys are like 200 pounds plus. It's quite fast. Yeah, it's shifting. And then getting these guys over 9, all of them over 9 meters per second by the Christmas. That was the goal, and because we had earned the right to run fast. And this is like, because you're But you see here at the bottom point is connecting the stimulus to the incomparable response or coping method. So if we understand the coping method of the stress, then we change the coping method to a productive one. Then the stress normalizes, then performance improves. It goes into like addiction psychology and behavioring models. It's a very broad thing that they use, that this is built upon. And in all honesty, I made up this game so I could bargain with my boss at the time because he wouldn't let me have the speed gates out. And that's how it started. He was too worried. And I was like, it's fine. I won't let them run fast. And as soon as I put them down on the side of the pitch for the first time, I knew I was onto something. And then started, riffing and going through and working through with that. And, it created something really crazy, because when we go back to this learn, load, execute model, that first round of Speedgate Golf is learn, load, and execute all built into one. And they can get so many extensive reps that you're looking operationally at about 7 out of 10 effort, 6 out of 10 effort. And you can tell the first time someone just floats across the ground, they're really, really relaxed, and then it drops as a 2. It's like, bang, as a coach, you jump straight in and you coach so aggressively, because there's one, and it will be like a mic drop moment with your athletes. And that is your opportunity. I was on a podcast the other day, and I said I'm probably not the smartest guy in the world, but in a certain room, I'm going to be the fastest thinker, because it's about what you can bring to life at a certain point in time is going to impact and make change on an athlete for the rest of their careers. And so then you've got a great example to then do a couple of things. You can reward the athlete. You can reward the group, because when that happens, trust me, a player will say that's money before you even look at the time, because the amount of reps that have gone through, they're watching the timing between the beeps is just about right. They can look at the steps. Because you go through this coaching process, they go in their mind. They'll go, fuck, step 1, step 2, like it all looks the same. It's smooth. It looks really, really slow. Bang. And then you get that person and go, right, now go run me a 1.8. Bang. And he'll hit a 1.8 something straight away. And because you've slowed them down so much that they understand it, that then it's like a catapult effect. And they'll just fucking slingshot. And before you know it, they'll be dropping some ridiculously fast times, as long as you don't fuck them up in the weight room too much and slow them down with too many heavy weights.
I love that. That's what you've done there is essentially you've shaped that learning environment just to account for all the different variables that you've got going on within team sports, and you've made them enjoy like something they were scared of at the end of the day. They typically, a team sport athlete, like the sounds of it, obviously when you get the gates out, they are, and it's the same when I get my guys or girls out, and they're like, oh, they can see that the gates are out, and you just think back to those reactions. So you've shaped that learning environment to be something that they massively enjoy, they want to be a part of. And they want to, like you say, they're jumping out, they're trying to say, okay, like predict times and stuff like that, and instead of actually being, you can almost listen and you can hear the sounds, obviously the foot contacts and things like that, and you're learning what's happening, and by slowing them down, you are speeding them up. And then that comes back to my other point, you're creating, I suppose, I know I've heard you talk about this before a little bit, you're saying you don't necessarily have to sprint fast, or the typical model of 95% to 100% or faster to get faster. You can almost not train slow, but you can train slower to get faster. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. Because if you think about, everyone knows that sprinting is the most taxing modality of training that you can do, other than getting hit by a car. But why do we disrespect that intensity by recommending 95% plus to develop? Surely, from a function of intensity versus operational versus maximal outputs, your capacity to develop that and produce that is underpinning your ability to produce that. So why do we disrespect speed? Because everyone talks about, oh yeah, X times body weight through this step and da 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 da. But yet they'll then go and put their team sport athletes through 4 sets of 60s. I saw someone on Twitter, a very respected coach, say this is a great speed session for you to do. I was like, fuck, like no, because you have not done 4 flat out 60s ever in your life, because it breaks people. Like, you are mentally crushed, and if you're not ready for it. So, and that's where it's like, right, you want to develop maximal strength, you'll use a classical, like, 3 sets of 5 wave load. Apply it to sprinting, apply it to contacts, apply it to effort, because you're then auto-regulating your athletes. You know, everyone gloats about, oh, my guy squatted 525 and only didn't squat above 315 all summer. Why can't we do that with sprinting? Because I guarantee that person got more technically efficient at squatting, and then if he wave loaded and was probably squatting moderate loads faster. So why don't we do that with sprinting? Why don't we understand and manipulate size principle with sprinting? Because that's what's going on. That is what's going on. And if we use our tools that are available to us, then you can really unlock some fucking devastating speed. And like I said, over 9 meters per second in 12 steps. That's like nearly 20. She was nearly 22 mile an hour. Wow. In 12 steps.
Yeah, that's crazy.
From a static start as well, 2 points standing, and we didn't run flat out before that.
That's phenomenal. I think especially a team sport athlete, which I think you work with, and obviously I work with a lot. From that point of view, if you're kind of taxing them too much from a sprinting point of view, you're still to an extent taking away from their sport skill development as well.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to almost pull back a little bit, where you can refine those technical points through the technical model and things like that, while keeping it fun. Because like we know, if an athlete enjoys something more, it's less of a stressor at the end of the day. You know, it doesn't take as much of a toll on the body. So if we can create an environment, and something I've actually played around with quite a lot this year is I take stupid amount of warm-ups per week, like a lot of strength and conditioning coaches do. We've got our weight room stuff, and then in the afternoon we've got our team practice. Now, if I do the same thing every time or whatever it is, the athletes are going to get bored of it. So one thing I've tried to do is I want them. It's been a goal of mine. It hasn't always worked, but it's been more often than not this year compared to last. When you leave my session, you go back to your coaches. This is generally on the tennis court. I want you to leave my session with a smile. Yeah. Something simple like that, because typically, and it happens a lot within kind of soccer and even tennis and stuff, they come over to you and they're like, oh, they see you as the fitness coach, and every time they come to you, they're going to do something that's going to like beat them up or make them tired. And I'm trying to change that persona, that no, we can actually leave you, like, you can go back to your team sport session or whatever it is, and you can feel good, you can be happy, you can be fresh and just ready to go. And I think that's really important. A lot of people, I think, miss that boat.
Yeah, 100%, Mark. Like I used to say to my my athletes, I said, straight away from the outset, so I give a shit about you. I'll be your best friend. I will be your best friend, and that's no question to me, because look, if you do well, I do well. Yeah. If you fight me, then we've got a problem, and that's when you do the good work, when there's a mutual understanding and a mutual respect. For me, comes from just not being a fucking dick. Yeah. Just and you said, have that goal, make it fun for them, make them enjoy it, make them want to be there. Especially, I've seen the inside of like the collegiate system as well. It's a fucking hard road for an athlete. It's hard. And the last thing they want to do is have some fucking dick with a whistle and a clipboard shouting at them. Like,
100%.
That's huge. That's huge, man.
I think at the moment as well, like, obviously it's a very unique situation that we're in, but there's no reason for not reaching out to your athletes. I've been having one-on-one kind of FaceTime calls with some of my athletes, just trying to help them through their training and stuff like that. And even if it's not, it doesn't have to be talking about training. It's just like, oh, what'd you have for lunch today? What's going on? I know realistically your situation is you're in the house, but like, what's been going on? What's going on Netflix? Like, what should I watch? I think those conversations are important.
Yeah, there's like, I'm a bit like cliches. Like I'm a big believer in cliches because they're true, right? There's no doubt about it. And I was talking with my I got a therapist because I'm working on my own. Like I've employed a therapist to help me like work through loads of shit, and it's the best thing you can ever do. And we were talking about cliches, and I was like, when you think about past relationships, you think about like especially with athletes and stuff, and I'm massively into this whole holistic thing. There's two things that really stick with me. Cliches is like people don't care until they know you care, and people don't remember what you did for them. They remember how you made them feel. And I think, you know, coaching is no different. They're like James. My first exposure to like elite level coaching was James Smith, thinker, and I spent 2 weeks with him. And on the first day, I asked him a question about like God knows fucking whatever it was, but he was like, he said, if the way that you coach and the ideas that you possess around coaching can be transferred to a carpenter, to an electrician, to an orchestra conductor, then you're on the right path. And that stayed with me forever. It's probably why I resigned from one job and got fired from the other. But it's stuff like that stayed for me, because when you're in a box, you've got to understand the limitations of that box. For sure.
I love it. All right, Sam, I'll start wrapping it up now. I don't want to keep you too long. I know you're a busy man. You've got a company to run. So I'm just going to finish off with one or two questions here. So I know quite a few young coaches reach out to you and maybe ask to intern with you and things like that. If there was a young coach maybe just coming to the end of their kind of university career, like, or trying to get into strength conditioning, pro sport, whatever it is, what piece of advice would you give them?
Your idea of what you can achieve and what you want to achieve as a coach is never as important as what you want to achieve as a man.
Wow. Went big. I love it. Perfect.
Or woman, we're gender neutral.
Of course.
Or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. But yeah, that would be that, you know, based on my story, that's what I'd say. 100%.
Yeah. Next question. What books? I know you said you're not a big book guy, but you've got a lot of books. Maybe a picture book you can recommend. What books would you recommend?
Painting by numbers. I have my sister. So I go into books when my coaching asks me questions. When I see something and it asks me a question, I'll buy a book, I'll look it up. My sister bought me a book for Christmas, and it's called, this tells you, it's called Systems Thinking. Yeah, it's called Systems Thinking. Really, really good. Really, really good. And I'll give you another one. Let me see what I've got in front of me. Like an actual like coaching. I'll give you three. Like a good coaching book to get your head into would be The Governing Dynamics of Coaching from James Smith.
Yep, great book.
And a book that you can read for yourself is called Wild by Cheryl Strayed. There's a movie with Reese Witherspoon called Wild, and this is a great book of like self-discovery and stuff. It's about a journey from lost to found, and it's like real transferable. It's about a woman who goes through a lot of stuff and walks the Pacific Crest Trail, never having hiked before, and it's like a baptism of fire type book. And then I'll give you a movie. That will tie you nicely into this, because I'm a big fan of stories. And so there's a movie with Shia LaBeouf called The Peanut Butter Falcon. Right?
I haven't seen that.
The Peanut Butter Falcon. It's fucking unbelievable. You'll be laughing one point, you'll be crying at another point. And if you really look, I've watched it about 4 times. And if you watch it, the story of human nature and human nurturing as a coach is fascinating. It is fascinating. And it's like it's an intersecting story of 3 different lives that come together. It's fucking brilliant. Fucking brilliant. It's a good coaching film.
Perfect. I'll put that on the. That's definitely going on the list during this period of downtime. I'll get that watch.
Exactly.
Final thing, Sam. I appreciate your time today. Where can people? I know you got a lot of things going on online. Where can people find you or find out more and get in touch with you?
So basically, everything really goes through Instagram, which is at coach_Sportland. My email address is sam@coachsportland.co.uk. So I've got a newsletter and stuff that comes out. So you'll find everything on Instagram. And if you've got specific questions about this episode or stuff, then just fire me an email. And we talked about Speedgate Golf, so we'll do this off air. But when I release it, I'll hook your listeners up with a discount code for that manual.
Perfect. Appreciate that. Thank you.
No worries, man. Anything. It's all good. Got to keep moving the fucking circle, don't we?
Absolutely. All right, Sam, I'll leave it there for today, but we'll have to get you back on at some other point as well, because I know there's loads of other stuff I'd love to get into. But thank you for today. Appreciate it.
Very welcome, man. Take care.